Hey guys, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Game of Gymnastics podcast. This week I'm joined by Tim Peake, the press officer for British Gymnastics, who has worked with them for 18 years, been to 4 Olympics and countless major events across all disciplines. We'll talk about the stories of gymnasts he's worked with over the years, what British Gymnastics is doing to spread the word of the sport, and what you can do to keep up with it, including the British Gymnastics this week. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Game of Gymnastics podcast. Thank you all for listening. And today we've got a very special guest. He's been working with British Gymnastics for 18 years. He's been to 4 Olympics, not as a part of the team, but as part of the support staff. He's currently the press officer for British Gymnastics. Here we have Tim Peake.
Thanks for having me on, Winston. I'm looking forward to it.
So, obviously we had a very quick discussion before I did the introduction, and you said that your job title has changed quite a bit during your time at British Gymnastics. So first off, what does that mean? Second off, what have you been doing at British Gymnastics? And third off, how did you get into British Gymnastics in the first place?
Yeah, all good questions. I studied sports journalism and journalism at university. I love sport. I love all sport. Even though I'm a Tottenham fan, I still manage to love sport. And when I finished uni, it was ahead of London 2012, and I really wanted to work in sport at an Olympic Games. I didn't, and probably still don't, know that much about gymnastics, if I'm being perfectly honest. And I actually think that's a slight advantage in the role. Gymnastics is quite a complicated sport, and part of my role is to help, the public understand what's going on and how incredible you guys are. So, I applied for a job at British Gymnastics as, copywriter, I think it was originally. And I joined a department and doubled the size of that department at the time. So there became 2 of us in marketing and comms. So I was fortunate enough to work with someone called Vera Atkinson, who is just a most incredible person, has a huge history in gymnastics, and sort of took me under her wing. So yeah, I started off really copywriting. So going to events and writing up the results. And this was back in the day where I'd have to ring a newspaper and read out every result of every gymnast performance. So you can imagine, we used to have internationals, and I'd have to sit there and, Winston Powell on vault scored this, on pommel horse, this, and they'd type it up. It makes me sound very old, I know. So, I started off as copywriting, and then I guess my roles evolved over time, where I guess there's 3 main strands to it. There's the press officer role, which I am the interface, I guess, between British Gymnastics and the media, and that's from a sort of organisational point of view, but also with many of you guys, with many of the gymnasts. If the Birmingham Mail say I want to interview Winston Powell, then they'll come to me probably, and then I'll come to you. So I'm sort of that interface. So that's an element of it. There's also the sort of, I think it's a bit over the top to call it athlete management, but I guess athlete assistance or help or support. So that could be in terms of PR activities or, public speaking or sponsorship opportunities and all that kind of stuff, just being kind of a person to help in that space. And then the other element is still the content side. So particularly around major events, I've been fortunate enough to go to, I can't count, but pretty much every in autistic, every Europeans and worlds for the past probably 16 years, other disciplines as well, 4 Olympic Games. And that's, on the content side of it, making sure that we're kind of celebrating how amazing you guys are. So it's changed a little bit. I think probably more so now I'm working on the sort of athlete support side, which I really, really enjoy. I think one of the great things about gymnastics is, I meet some of you guys at junior level or even younger, and then, before you know it, you're at Olympic Games or World Championships or wherever in your journey. And it's like, for me, it's really special to be a part of that journey. So it's been an amazing, 18, nearly 19 years. Yeah, it's been good.
That's really cool. I'm assuming you've got quite a few stories then, probably from those major games especially. What's one gymnast that as you've said, you've watched grow up that stands out to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, it's not necessarily about, because I'm not a gymnast, I'm not a coach, I'm not
Mm.
like, I love what you guys do, but I'll leave it to you guys.
Yeah.
So it's not always about achievements in gymnastics necessarily. It's about the growth of the person. So I was thinking beforehand, like you look back at, say that men's team in London 2012, and obviously they achieved incredible things in gymnastics, but look what they've done since, look
Mm.
at the people that they've become, Dan Purvis, I guess, is an example of, I first met Dan and he was so shy. And, the idea of Dan doing an interview was like, this is never going to happen. And now look at him. He's running a really successful business. He's inspiring kids every single day. He's going into schools.
Mm.
So I think it's stuff like that I guess, like, I'm really sort of proud of having even just a tiny bit of that journey.
Mm.
Because ultimately, we want people to leave gymnastics and go on to have really successful lives, whether that's within gymnastics or outside of it. But we want people to leave the sport, confident and happy and supported. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of examples of that, of I guess, because as I say, we saw interactions when I guess people are, 10, 12 years old, and then you see them grow and you're like, wow, Christian Thomas, for example, you look at the work that he's doing, Sam Alden, Niall, like, it's just incredible. I'm talking about obviously the men because you being a men's artistic gymnast, but there's lots of examples through all disciplines of people that have just gone on and done incredible things. And that's, yeah, I if I can have a tiny little bit of help along that journey, then, that's great.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned Dan because I actually interviewed him literally well, for me, it was less than a week ago, like just before the Welsh. So it's interesting that you mentioned specifically Dan and specifically interviewing because that's exactly what I did.
Yeah. Like I say, I mean, we've probably, yeah, I could be cruel. We've probably got some old videos of Dan when we did sort of media practice and training back in the day. But he just, yeah, he came out of his shell and he worked on it, and that's what I say to a lot of young gymnasts, because it is nerve wracking sometimes doing interviews, and I think people focus on the potential pitfalls, but the one thing I always say to gymnasts is remember how incredible you are. I think because often your peer groups are other gymnasts,
Mm.
so you don't actually look at the bigger picture and actually like, wow, just it's not about the medals that you win. It's about the effort you put in. It's about your dedication. It's about all these skills that you guys have that other people of your age maybe don't have. So I think that's like step one of sort of the PR and media route, is just always remember how incredible you are. When gymnasts say to me, "Oh, why do they want to interview me?" I'm like, because you're amazing at what you do. And I think if you get that confidence from an early age, and think about stories and background and what inspires you and stuff, then yeah, you can go a long way in our sport.
Yeah, absolutely. What's one thing that you would say separates gymnastics from other sports?
I think, well, yeah, it's a good question. I'm fortunate enough to have worked in other sports. So when I work at the Olympic Games, I second to Team GB for those time periods, and I become what's called a multi-sport press officer. So I will work in gymnastics and another sport, or sometimes two sports. I think the big thing for me in gymnastics is just the age group. So I think what is great is that we're able to support people from a young age, and I think we're probably, from working with other sports, we as a support team interact with you guys more than some other sports get the opportunity to, which is great, which means we can sort of follow the journey a bit more. So that's incredible. I think that obviously the work, the dedication, the hours that you guys put in is probably more than some other sports. I'd actually just, it's pretty cool what you do as well. Like I think that sometimes gets forgotten. I think the opportunities now, like the world's moved a long way in 18 years, but like the content you guys can be putting out. You look at obviously Niall was at the forefront of doing all that, but Lucy Colbeck in who was a tumbler, went to Cirque du Soleil. She was nominated for TikTok Creator of the Year this year just because of the amazing stuff she can do. So I think, yeah, we're fortunate in gymnastics that we've got really great people that are really grounded and obviously work really hard, but also do amazing things as well. And yeah, for me, it's just reminding people of that sometimes, because it's easy, you've had a long day in the gym, you're a bit tired. It's easy to sort of forget that at times. And I guess I'm, the hype man for you guys in terms of all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey guys, Winston here. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you are, please do leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you can. Also, if you want more gymnastics content from me, you can check out my Instagram at wpowell05 or my TikTok at winstonpowell5. Thank you, and let's get back to the episode.
So, I mean, obviously, most gymnasts won't really do anything to promote themselves or the sport in general. What would you say one of the biggest challenges in promoting gymnastics is?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. One of the sort of really bigger picture is, other sports have a really regular season of events. You look at football, netball, rugby, whatever, they have a season and it's week in, week out. And therefore you can follow people's journeys. There's league tables, really, all that kind of stuff. There's a bit of you can create a fan base there. I guess, you'll see it in Germany in the German Gymnastics League. There's a bit of you can almost have that support then because you can follow it. So
Yeah.
It's quite tricky that gymnastics comes about really for the public, Europeans and worlds, and then Olympic Games. So I think one of the challenges is how can we consistently get gymnastics into people's minds? And I think part of that is how can gymnasts be consistently creating content, posting content. I think it's natural, people have peaks and troughs in what they do. So they'll, people will create loads of cool content and then forget about it for 6 weeks. I think, again, to talk about Niall slightly, like he really committed to his content. He really works at it. He's really focused at it. He's targeted at it. I mean, he is the best out there, but he started that. I remember having chats with him at the Commonwealth Games in Australia about, that journey that he was going on, and he was already way ahead of everyone else. So I think one of the things I'd say is just try and, have a plan, be consistent with it, and then you'll create that following and people will follow your journey. And also, I think don't forget your community. It's like everyone wants to be this super famous, national hero, but think about, I always say, you, Winston, are an absolute idol to the younger kids in your gym. That's pretty cool for a start, So never forget that, you're an idol to the people back at your primary school, in your community, in your city, so there's, you're not always going to jump straight to being, a worldwide celeb, but don't forget the people around you in the community and embrace that from the start, I guess.
Yeah, I get that. So you said obviously that the competition seasons is a bit, it's hard to keep people interested, I suppose. So when there is a competition like the British Championships, what do you do? How do you go about promoting it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, straight after this, I have a meeting about the British Championships. So there we are, Simon. So, to start with, I'll also say I'm part of a much wider team now. So when I started, there were 2 of us. Now there's 12, 14 of us, I guess, that would work on something like the British Championships. And that's a marketing team. It's a branding team. It's a video production team, social team, PR. So we start the journey in terms of getting tickets on sale last year. And now tickets, by the way, are going brilliant this year, which we're really super excited about. So on Saturday in particular, it's going to be super busy and a great atmosphere. So that's great. So yeah, from, this afternoon, we then talk about, right, so what are the touch points from between now and the British, which is 5 weeks away. So we have obviously mail outs to our members. We have obviously all our social channels, the website. We can start doing preview articles. We've started twice a week now posting routines from previous British to get people excited. We then start reaching out to the media in Liverpool to start getting them excited and create some opportunities around that. Make sure we're in all the what's on guides and all that kind of stuff. And then when it comes to the event itself, don't know if this is public knowledge yet, but it will at some point become public knowledge that it's going to be on the BBC. which is pretty cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of work by the British Gymnastics team to make that happen. So that's going to be ace, and there's going to be some studio set up and some very familiar names to you that
I
will
got to
be in
make
the
sure this comes
studio.
out before. I got to make sure this comes out before the British now.
So that'll be really cool. But then also, it's the wraparound stuff. One of our themes for this year's British is celebrating coaches and community. So it's about celebrating, obviously, the gymnasts and the really cool stuff and getting some amazing content. But it's also the partnerships that happen every day, whether that's with a coach or a family member or a friend, because the British is a great platform to show how amazing gymnastics is. So that's one of the themes you'll be seeing in our content this time, is like really focusing on that collaboration between gymnasts, coaches, family, friends, support staff. So yeah, a lot of work goes into it, but the Artistic British Championships in particular is the showpiece event. So for us, it's a really important time of the year, and get as many eyeballs on it as possible. And like I say, having it on the BBC is a huge win for that. So yeah, no, we're super excited about it. Also, on the Thursday and Friday in particular, there's going to be, I think it's 2,000 or 3,000 school kids are coming along.
Jesus.
Which will be cool, to get the atmosphere. You can imagine the noise, Winston.
Oh, yeah, I can.
So that's going to be great. And I think, each year we're working at it and we're having to be creative with ideas. But
what days would they be coming on?
I think they're coming on the Thursday and Friday.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So is that like the younger groups?
Yeah.
The disability British as well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But what I would say is I think the Artistic British Championships, when you look at potentially British Championships in other sports, the fact that we're in a huge arena and there's a pretty decent crowd, you even compare it to our Euros or Worlds at times, and the British Championships is right up there. I think it's something everyone should be really proud of, to be honest, as an event.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my history with the British is not very positive, I will say. I've had some issues competing well at it, but every year, to be fair, I've only been to the arena in Liverpool once since COVID, but I've been there before. I've been there obviously once since in 2022. And yeah, the atmosphere is incredible. Like, even having been 2 years ago and having a pretty vague memory of it, and then being around it again last year, but as a spectator instead because I broke my ankle. It is really entertaining because, especially for I don't know about the apparatus final. I'm assuming it's similar to what it was 2022, but I wasn't a spectator then. But yeah, stuff's going on all the time, so it's not like you're ever missing it. There's not really a dull moment unless they're moving around, but they always involve the audience at that point as well.
Yeah,
so it is quite
it's something we're conscious of. I think, again, slightly in a way helps that I'm not from a gymnastics background, is that one of the challenges in gymnastics, you take the all around on the Saturday, so the senior all around, arguably the most prestigious title. The challenge is people will watch it, and let's say Max is there, and maybe doing two pieces, and people look and they go, "Oh, Max is 84th. What's happened to Max Whitlock? He's not as good as he used to be." So I think the challenge sometimes is helping people understand actually what's happening, and that some people do certain pieces and some people do all pieces and all that kind of thing. I think that's one of the challenges in gymnastics, is that because actually as a fan to really understand is quite a challenge sometimes. So I think that's something we've definitely looked at, and that is in terms of big screens, announcers, all that kind of stuff, helping to take people on that journey. Because ultimately what you really want is at the end of that all around for the eyes to be on the two people, the man and the woman who are potentially going to win. Like you say, there's a lot going on in the arena, so I think part of our work is to help people kind of understand how the flow of the competition works. But we're getting there. But yeah, this year is going to be it's going to be amazing.
I was going to say, like, emphasizing specifically the fact that it's also a qualification event might help in terms of
Yeah,
saying that it's a qualification for the finals tomorrow instead
yeah,
of it's the all-around final, which it is,
yeah,
but it's
yeah. And
both.
that's the point. There's a few things going on at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just trying to help people. I mean, the great thing is ultimately people sit there and just go, "This is ace." They'll see a routine and think it's amazing,
Mm.
and and that for us is just that's the best thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it is. So obviously the British will be quite like elite,
Yep.
elite athletes. So how do you promote both those high level athletes and also the grassroots participation for
Yeah,
level?
yeah. It's a challenge, and I would say the other challenge is all disciplines. It's not just about artistic gymnastics. And we're
Yes.
obviously focusing on that because you're an artistic gymnast yourself, and that's fine.
Mm.
So we've done quite a lot of work over the last few months on how can we help even the field a little bit in terms of putting resource into all disciplines, making sure that every discipline is celebrated. An example of that would be Team Gym last year, the European Championships. So I think probably for the first time ever, one of our team went to a Team Gym major championships
Mm.
and was there filming and doing interviews and making sure that was celebrated. And that's what we want to be consistent in across all disciplines because we're all Great Britain. We're all Great Britain gymnasts here on the same journey. So that's a challenge. And then the grassroots element, like you say, is we do more. So like you'll have seen, for example, we did a Rise competition at Lilleshall last year. There's another one coming up in June. In the recreational space, things like gym fusions really help, and those are an opportunity for us to celebrate some more recreational gymnastics, performance gymnastics. So I was at a gym fusion in Manchester on Sunday. And ultimately, we can't be everywhere all the time. There's only a finite kind of amount of people in our team. But yeah, I think we always want to celebrate. You look at, the national awards that we announced recently. They're a good example of us really celebrating grassroots gymnastics, celebrating the people involved, celebrating volunteers, coaches, support staff, all that kind of thing. So it is something we're really conscious of, but ultimately, like I say, there's a finite amount we can do, but we do the best we can.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So obviously behind all of these people that you're celebrating, there'll be quite a few stories. Do you use like storytelling in those stories in your campaigns? And if so, how do you select them and how do
Yeah.
you actually promote them?
Yeah, I think an example of that, we've done a series called Find Your Amazing. And that is a series of videos that really celebrate unique stories within our sport. So yeah, everyone check those out on our YouTube channel. And that's what it's about. You're right. It's about stories. It's about, sometimes it may be adversity. Sometimes it's people that have come from another sport into gymnastics. Sometimes it's people that, are trying gymnastics for the first time. And I think, we're keen to hear about all those stories, and we do reach out to the community and say, tell us about your stories and we'd like to cover them. So yeah, I think, and again, when it comes to major championships, Olympic Games, World Championships, I work really closely with the BBC in terms of helping them understand gymnast stories. So commentators and producers and interviewers will come to me beforehand, or I'll spend a lot of time with them at major events, trying to give a little bit of background flavour to the gymnasts, where they've come from, what they've had to face, who supports them, what their hobbies are. It's just trying to make people stand out. We talk a lot about the Olympic Games in terms of actually people remember the personalities often more than the medals. If you think back to Olympic Games, there'll be moments that you remember, and that's not necessarily who won a gold medal. It's, I remember that person because I saw a video of them. Great example is Jake Jarman. We did a feature with him and his nan because Jake got discovered doing gymnastics in a park in Huntingdon. He was on the bars, and someone spotted him and said, "Oh, he should do gymnastics." And he was with his nan. So we did a piece with BBC Breakfast last year, the year before, where Jake got taken back to that park, and then we interviewed his nan, and it's things like that. And people now will remember Jake because they'll remember the connection he has with his nan and how he got discovered. And yet it is the stories sometimes that, are arguably more important than the results and the medals, is actually the personalities and the stories behind that.
Yeah. I mean, people will resonate a lot with other people and their stories. Mm-hmm. So having that sort of outlet to
and I think particularly in the Olympic space, it's competitive field. You've got a lot of outstanding athletes all in one space.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
It's important that we work on people's stories and help people sort of sell themselves when it comes to Olympic Games. It's quite a competitive field. Every sport wants their moment in the spotlight, and we do everything we can to make sure gymnastics is right up there.
Yeah. So obviously, there are a lot of diehard gymnastics fans, whether that be gymnasts themselves, coaches, all that sort of stuff, people heavily involved in the sport. So how do you make sure it appeals to them and new audiences?
It's
obviously quite hard because one group know it like inside out, and then the other haven't known.
I think we'll put our hands up and say our focus has to be on the mass audience, the majority, and try to get people into the sport and people that are in the sport engaged. The fact is, out of our however many 400,000 members, it's quite a small amount that are super elite like you guys. Most people do gymnastics relatively recreationally. So it is, I do think we probably will never fulfill that space that some people may want, but there's lots of other people that can help, yourself included, Sam Alden included in his podcast, and lots of other people that are putting out, the sort of real technical stuff. You see all the gymnastics blogs and websites and all that kind of thing. And I think if we were to do that, so, we obviously try and sprinkle some nuggets of, big information out there and then more of the technical stuff. But we have to be conscious of alienating people. Sometimes if you put some of that out there, people don't understand it, and that might switch them off a little bit. So, as with everything, it's a balance, Winston. It's just, you have to look at your audiences first and their needs. But it's a constant balance. And that's actually probably where you guys come into it. If we're interviewing you guys and you can give some real insight in your words, that's sometimes a little bit easier than us just putting stuff out there, I guess. But it's something we're conscious of, and it's, I guess you can never make everyone happy all the time, but we try to balance it as the year goes along, I guess.
Yeah, I get that. So obviously you've mentioned social media quite a lot. It's obviously very important to your work. How do you stay ahead of all the trends that are going on?
Well, firstly, I'll put my hand up and say I'm not leading on social media. Luckily, we have some great people in our team that are doing that. It's so difficult. I mean, everything's changing so quickly. Trends change and they come and go like that. I think we're adapting all the time. We're probably, our following is huge. Like, you compare British Gymnastics following to other leading Olympic sports, we're probably the number one. But that's not to say we shouldn't keep striving to improve and keep striving to adapt. It's always a challenge. I think you'll find over this year we'll probably start to really focus on different channels and what they're for as well. So primarily we're using now Facebook and Instagram. We're doing stuff on TikTok, X. We're not really doing a huge amount on anymore. LinkedIn has obviously come into the mix, and that's now a huge element as well. It's a challenge. Ultimately, we want to, you look on our Instagram, I'd say everything's pretty engaging, fun, uplifting. We have to balance campaigns and important information with cool stuff and event stuff and any other stuff. But I would say, I'd say we're pretty good at it. And the good thing is that you guys are really good at it. You know, gymnasts as a whole are very into social media. And if we can help magnify that and share some of the stuff that you guys are doing, then it's, it's a win-win, really.
Yeah. So how do you work with gymnasts to promote themselves?
Yeah, so we do sessions with juniors or younger gymnasts. So as part of the Live, Train, Compete program, we'll do a sort of initial session that talks about media, social media, explaining sort of the media landscape in terms of opportunities that might arise from, local papers, regional news, national news, all that kind of stuff, and how that would work. And again, we touch on storytelling and asking people to really think about, again, coming back to it, how amazing they are, what their journey's been, how, what their hopes and ambitions are, the people that have supported them. So then that sort of helps them form in their mind a bit of a story. And then on socials, we talk about the positives. It's great for the sport. It shows how cool you all are. It shows all that kind of stuff. It can create opportunities in terms of sponsorship and support. It creates a fan base. It helps, if a gymnast goes on that journey and is, makes it to Olympic Games, for example, to have that sort of catalogue of their journey on socials can be really beneficial, because it gives people that a place to go, oh, look where this person's come from, look what they've done, look what they've achieved, look at their journey, look at the highs and lows. But to be honest, we also talk about the I guess risks of social media. It can become overwhelming. As athletes for Great Britain, there's a certain amount of responsibility you need to take when you're posted on social media. So we talk about that as well. It's not to scare people, but what I always say is, the stuff you guys should be posting is probably different to the stuff your mates at school should be posting, and it's sometimes hard for everyone to realize that, but that again is part of us trying to work with you guys at a relatively young age, and acknowledging that it's not a simple world that you guys live in. And it's so it's so like, again, I show how old I am, but I didn't have social media growing up. So I think maybe I was a bit fortunate for that. But I appreciate it's a huge part of people's lives. And we try and be there to help. I think ultimately we're there if people need us, and I think that's what I always say to people. Like, there's some gymnasts that, I'll speak to almost every day because I want support in various aspects. There's some that are like, no, I'm all right, mate. And that's fine by me. I think it's just letting people know that we're there to support them in all these areas, in social media, in media, in PR, in sponsorship opportunities, all that kind of stuff. I think it's letting people know that we're there to support them and help them in any way, really.
Yeah, I get that. So obviously with all of this, because social media is relatively new, and obviously British Gymnastics won't have been using social media for the entire time that you've been around, how has that sort of landscape changed over the course of however many years it's been?
Yeah, it's changed. I mean, ultimately, when I started, there would be an event. I would write a report on the event, and like I say, I would ring a newspaper and say, "This is a result of that event." It would go on our website, and that would be it. Now everything, and that may be the day after. Now everything has to be immediate. I think we've got the World Cup in Cottbus coming up this weekend. So I'll be keeping an eye on that all weekend. I'm in a WhatsApp group with the heads of delegations, and I'm like, send me photos, send me this, send me that, because I think there is that immediacy to it, which is great, but it also is quite full on because there's something happening all the time. But I do think we just have that direct contact with people now that we didn't have before. We can immediately be in people's faces with stuff, which is really good, and we can get more content out. I guess it's easier to create content than it used to be. we used to, in the days of BGTV, I don't know if you remember BGTV, which was sort of almost pre-YouTube kind of.
Vaguely.
Yeah, There's some interesting videos still around from that time. But we'd go to a club, we'd film with them, and it maybe 3 weeks later we've put something together and we've put it out there. Whereas on socials now we can be really quick with everything. We can get immediate reactions. You can get immediate emotions, which is great. We can at major events. I can stand in a mix zone and interview people within 3 minutes of them competing. So I think that's one of the real benefits of it, and I think that's where it shifts how we work, is that we can be really flexible and adaptable, and we can at events ultimately you want that moment. You want to be there for that moment and capturing that moment, and that's what you can do now. And having social media means we can, I guess, bring a bit more of that behind the scenes and a bit more of the reality of gymnast lives, straight to people, which is really cool, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the behind the scenes stuff is quite interesting because it shows just how hard we work, just how much goes into it as well. Like, not only in terms of the training and all that sort of stuff back home, but also the actual process of competition, because they only see the actual routine. They don't really see the warm up, the podium training the day before, all that sort of stuff. So it is quite interesting to see all the behind the scenes stuff as well as the actual performance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do think, particularly around events. I remember a few years ago we went to Tokyo to film a training camp, and part of that was to really show what goes on behind the scenes. And it's things like the setup in the hotels and stuff, and the physio rooms, and the getting on the bus. Like, you always have to get on a bus in gymnastics for some reason. It's all that behind the scenes stuff that people just won't, like you say, people just won't realize. They think you guys just walk on and click your fingers and perform magic. It's like, no, there's a lot more to it. So yeah, it's definitely something we want to do more of. And then for me as well, it's I guess post competition stuff that people don't always see.
Yeah.
I was thinking about at some of the Olympic Games, just in Paris last year, Jake and Harry, the amount of media and things they had to do post competition. I think, but if they got 3 hours sleep after that comp, I'd be amazed. It's pretty full on, but it's really cool. So, like, to be able to sort of share some of that journey on social media as well was great, because I think people just understandably don't understand the just the huge scale of the project that goes on around you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I can only imagine what it was like being in that position, like just having won an Olympic medal and probably being hounded by like hundreds of people.
Yeah, it can get a bit full on. I mean, it's great, and I think again that's part of working with people from a young age and through their journey, is that hopefully when they get to an Olympic Games, they're sort of used to it. Like, you're never going to quite be used to winning an Olympic medal or the reaction that comes afterwards. But, hopefully in terms of dealing with media and all that kind of stuff, people feel a bit more comfortable by that time. But yeah, you're never going to
Yeah.
perfectly know what it's like until it happens, I guess.
I guess it's just being more prepared rather than like
Yeah.
it's not about knowing exactly what will happen. It's just being able to cope with what will happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think, and that's why I'm always keen to get out to events, as many as possible, and be part of that, because I think one of the real privileges of my job is, pretty much I'm the first person a gymnast will see after they compete, which is incredible. And he actually, in both aspects, if a gymnast wins an Olympic medal, I'll be the first person they see, and I'm like, well, that's that. But also, actually, if a gymnast perhaps doesn't have the performance they want, again, I'm the first person they see, and that's why I want to build relationships with athletes, because I have to be able to sort of deal with both ends of the spectrum to a degree, and all I want is for them to, I guess, trust that I've got their back no matter which way it goes. Yeah, it's the mix zone after after Olympic competition is it can be quite an intense environment. So, a big part of my job at Olympic Games is to help gymnasts navigate that area because, again, like you guys are comfortable on a pommel horse or on a beam. It's not sometimes that simple to then do that and then walk in and have 50 reporters in your face asking you questions that you weren't expecting. So I think my job is to try and help people navigate that and be sort of the trusted person if anyone needs any support, I guess.
Yeah, like I saw like a little bit of behind the scenes in terms of the Commonwealth Games 2022, and just seeing like the corridor. It was so long, and literally there was report. Like it was literally packed. So yeah, I mean, it is intense after you just come off.
Yeah, it can be intense, and I think and there's a lot of emotions going on. It can be quite emotionally charged, and in general, the journalists are pretty decent and pretty nice. And again, that's where I work with them to understand maybe the emotions that a gymnast might be facing, and sort of prepare the gymnast and prepare the journalist at the same time. It's an interesting part of my job. I think, there's some examples that I can think of, with Max, for example, both ends of the spectrum. He finished in Paris and was very emotional, which is completely understandable. So therefore you have to, be that support for Max, not that Max needs much support, let's be honest.
Yeah.
He's a complete legend, but if I could possibly be there to help him slightly, then great. And that differs from, Rio, where he won 2 gold medals in an hour or whatever it was. And it's just, it's learning to deal with both sides of it, I guess. And, it's that's probably the sort of pinnacle of my job is that moment. And actually talking about storytelling earlier, I think one of my favorite experiences of an Olympic mixed zone was probably Bryony Page in Rio. So trampoline probably wasn't on the top of most media's radar, if I'm being honest. And I was trying to sort of say, well, we've got someone called Bryony, she's pretty good, kind of thing. And I remember a lot of journalists sort of sprinting over when they realised that she was going to win a medal, and not knowing anything about trampolining, and me having to sort of slightly guide them about trampolining. And then Bryony walks in, and in her interviews, I can't quite remember how it happened, but she started talking about how she had a lucky dinosaur lunchbox that she carried around with her. And that's just, like a totally off the what's it comment. But that immediately engaged all the journalists. They were like, oh, she's someone a bit different. She's a bit quirky. She's got a bit of a story to tell. And actually, I mean, every newspaper then was, dinosaur girl wins Olympic medal or whatever. But it was just like, that was an example of something that was just a bit of Bryony's personality, and I think it's important for people to not try and be robots, to try and be themselves. And actually, that's something that, I mean, she probably regrets it now, but has stuck with Bryony ever since. People always ask her, where's your dinosaur lunchbox in interviews? But you know what I mean? It's just, again, an example of people being authentic and just being themselves, which I think is really important. It's quite hard sometimes to do that because, people worry about saying the wrong thing, or, you might see other sports people and think, oh, I have to talk like that. But no, I think it's important to be authentic and be yourself.
Yeah. So you said that you're often the first person that a gymnast will see once they've competed. Does that mean that you're occasionally the one leading the interviews, or are you just there to support?
Yeah, it would change. So at a Olympics, I'd probably be the last person. I would, because Olympics, it's a complete beast. In Paris, a gymnast would finish. They would have to talk to Eurosport, which was actually Niall, so that was pretty cool. That helps because Niall was the friendly face everyone saw first. So Eurosport, BBC, maybe 2 or 3 American networks, maybe then 3 or 4 regional TV or radio networks. Then they'd walk into the print element, and then probably I'd speak to them right at the very end. But I guess what I try and do is be the first person they see. And if there's particular issues they want to talk about, or if they're a gymnast is like, what do I say about this? Or how do I get this across? I can have that little moment, I guess. And then at other major championships, so yeah, certainly Europeans and Worlds, I'm a bit of everything. So I'm the press officer, which is sort of that role I just described, but then I'm also the one doing the interviews as well, which I think helps because I can, again, because I sort of maybe know the gymnasts, I can perhaps lead the questions that work best.
Yeah.
And that's where, like I say, that's where my roles changed, and I have to sometimes be a bit of everything. But it's good for me as well. I was thinking, was it Junior Euros last year? Meeting some of the guys for the first time, and Uzair and Sol and people like that who I'd never met before, and now suddenly I know a little bit about them. They maybe know who I am a little bit, and it just then helps, for this whole next cycle.
Yeah, I guess you're more used to being on the other side of a camera then. You're not particularly used to being the one interviewed.
No, I'm not. Although, like I say, when we first did BGTV, I was the person on camera then. And luckily, I've gone to the other side now. I think this is probably the first interview I've done about my role, actually. And it's funny because people always say, "What do you do for a living?" So hopefully they can watch this and understand a little bit about what I do.
Nice. So what's one of your favorite things about what you do then?
It's definitely, like I say, it obviously the Olympics are incredible, and I'm very privileged to work for Team GB during Olympic Games, and outside of gymnastics. So for example, in Tokyo, I was the press officer for skateboarding as well as gymnastics. So I get to work with Sky Brown, who's obviously one of, an absolute worldwide superstar skateboarder. In Rio, I did golf, and I love golf. So I got to follow Justin Rose around on a golf course for a few days. That's pretty cool. In Paris, sports climbing. So Toby Roberts won gold in sports climbing, and I was there at that moment and sort of had to do that same journey with him then. And that's just that's super cool. But then, like I say, also, let's say Sunday, I went to Gym Fusion with Abby Martin, and Abby is still only 16. Obviously, she competed at Olympic Games last year, but she went to a Gym Fusion and stood on a stage in front of however many thousand people on a theatre stage, which is a bit of an alien environment, and did an interview. And, Abby wouldn't have done that this time last year. And I think maybe me and the rest of the team have had some input in supporting Abby in those sort of skills to be able to then do that. So it's stuff like that, stuff like that I'm proud of. And then, like I say, it's people that have done gymnastics and then gone on to other stuff or use gymnastics to help them in life. So I think, Kelly Sim, Claudia Fragapane, what they're doing, they've pretty much got a business together now, and are traveling the world talking about gymnastics and inspiring others and all that kind of stuff. And it's when you see people do that, it's really cool. Like, Ellie Downey, the stuff that she's doing with her Pilates in Manchester. It's like, I remember I must have met Ellie when she was maybe 5 or 6. I don't know. So like for her to have then had a career and then done what she's done and then, have a successful business and all that, it's pretty cool. So I think that's the most rewarding part of the job, I guess. There's challenges along the way, like being the press person for an organization. We're going to have our ups and downs, and there'll be issues along the way. But I think overall gymnastics is in a really good place, and I think a lot of that is down to the people in gymnastics, and the gymnasts being at the forefront of that, obviously.
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of got to be the people doing the sport that have to sort of be at the forefront, because it's it's hard to. What I've found is quite hard to talk about something without having some sort of like visual aid there, and they become that visual aid to help sort of explain why we do what we do, not just in terms of the results, but also because I mean it looks cool, as you said before.
It looks cool, and I think you learn so many life skills from gymnastics. It's like, well, you're doing this because of gymnastics. It's like it's a pretty cool thing. It's like you've learned so many skills through dedication, passion, hard work, all that kind of stuff, but also communication skills and taking yourself out of your comfort zone every now and then and doing new things. Like arguably you wouldn't have done that if you weren't in the sport of gymnastics. So it can really sort of enhance people's lives, I think.
I mean, I certainly wouldn't be talking about gymnastics if it wasn't a gymnast, because I wouldn't know anything about it.
What's this experience been like for you, Winston? Doing these podcasts and talking to other people. What have you learned from it? Do you think
it has been interesting in that I have had to take myself out of my comfort zone a lot?
Yeah,
because, well, like. Not even like the interviews themselves. I'm fine with talking. I'm fine with asking questions. I'm fine with all that. Because I've had some amount of practice with that. But it was asking people to be on it. And like actually putting myself out there and saying, I'm doing this thing. Will you help me?
Yeah.
Like, that was really hard. Like, it was like, that was one of the hardest bits about it. And then putting it together and then actually having the guts to say, okay, I am doing this now, and telling people I'm doing this now. Yeah. Because there's always that fear of failure. And there's always the worry about what if it goes wrong and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And what if I can't commit? What if I start it and then have to stop it immediately? Yeah. And then everyone knows that I failed it. Like, there's always those doubts.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day...
Now you've done it and it's working and it's going great.
Yeah. At the end of the day, like, always is gymnastics that we go back to. But, like, you've got a deadline where you have to compete. You like, there's no two ways about it. It doesn't matter where your routines are at. It doesn't matter what is going on elsewhere. You have to be ready for then. And no matter what it looks like, no matter what it if it's perfect, if it's not, it won't be. You just got to put something out there. And that's essentially what I've tried to do. Like, it doesn't matter if it's good, doesn't matter if it's bad. I can get feedback along the way. I can improve it. I can tweak it. So that's sort of why I've done it and why I've just sort of committed to it.
Well, I think it's brilliant. Yeah. You should be very proud of yourself.
Thank you very much. So, speaking of the podcast, I suppose, now that you've been on it, now that you've experienced it as much as the questions are very much tailored to you, who do you think would be a good fit for the podcast?
Yeah, good question. I definitely think some of the experiences of some of the ex-gymnasts would be worth talking to. Some of the people that I talked about then in terms of, gymnasts, particularly in the sort of funded programs, like don't leave the sport without making use of the incredible resources around you. I think, whilst obviously you work extremely hard, I think sometimes people don't always appreciate the resources and the support that's around them. With the performance lifestyle team, nutritionists, marketing and comms team, everyone at British Gymnastics, we're here to support you guys. So I think any of the people that have maybe gone through the sport and retired and have, gone on and done these incredible things, I think will be worth talking to. I also think perspectives from all the disciplines, and the stories from those. And yeah, I think just the variety, isn't it? I think is important. I think gymnastics is a massive variety of people. One of the great things about gymnastics is, anyone, it's for everyone really. At any age, any ability, all that kind of stuff. So I think the more variety, because then you'll find out things that you never knew, and you'll find out stories you never knew, and you'll be able to then share those with people. So, but yeah, you're doing a great thing, Winston. I think,
Well,
I think
thank
you
you
should
very
be,
much.
like I say, very proud of yourself.
Well, thank you. So that is all I have for today. So thank you very much for coming on. Thank you all for listening to the Game of Gymnastics podcast, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.